Coogs House. J1 said run it back, and now LJ said run it back. So we're going to run it back again. Who's with us?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. If you don't know what to say but want to join in the conversation, tell us in the comments down below your thoughts on the pimento cheese sandwich. It is Masters Week, folks. Now, today's show is brought to you by GameTime. More on that in a moment. We got all kinds of fun things to get into. We're going to continue to preview this weekend's spring football game, but looking at who's been catching footballs in Houston. I got some concerns there, actually, which I think is putting me on an island a little bit, no pun intended. I want to talk some about Jamal Shead and why that's an important topic we're going to continue to talk about each and every day here at Locked On Coogs, it seems like. But first and foremost, the news of the day is one LJ Cryer committing to return to the Houston Cougars on Tuesday, April 9th. Now, you remember LJ Cryer is a Katy Morton Ranch kid. He is a local kid that initially went to Baylor at a high school, won the title there in 2021, beat Houston in the Final Four to do so. Still seeking to be the first player to ever win a national title on two different programs. There's a big storyline being built up as Houston was moving closer and closer to that goal. And frankly, up until about Jamal's sprained ankle, it was a big storyline as well. In talking through his decision, it sounded like he actually, quote, decided a couple of days ago. He said that he has a lot more growth to do and that he feels like, quote, we got a chance to do something special here. And then he would also add on that it didn't make sense for him to go into the draft process right now with, quote, what I've got going on. We would later find out through some reporting. I think I saw it from Duarte first, but Baldwin of Paper City Mag had the same thing. He's having foot surgery on Wednesday. So, best of thoughts sent LJ's way, obviously, on that foot surgery. Another injury that it sounds like was lingering throughout the season for the Houston Cougars. For what it's worth, in a similar vein, Jalen Roberts also spoke to reporters for the first time since formally committing to return on Monday night. He was on crutches, said that he had just had knee surgery a few days prior. Sounded like they'd taken a bunch of stuff out, scraped a bunch of stuff out, cleaned it all up. Nothing too crazy structural. And he did say he could, resume basketball activities fully in 6 weeks, right? So hopefully both things go very well. LJ and J1's recoveries. I thought a couple of things here were interesting. One, neither one would speak on behalf of anyone except for themselves. They spoke separately, but they didn't want to speak on behalf of Malik Wilson, who also did chime in saying he's coming back formally later in the evening. He had said informally after the Duke game that he was coming back, but digressing a little bit. Second, they wouldn't obviously comment on Jamal. When asked about Jamal Shead, every reporter wanted to know, you're all coming back in, the gang back together. What can you tell us about Jamal Shead? They both kind of laughed, shrugged, and said, hey, you got to talk to him about his situation. Everyone's situation is different. Best of luck to everyone what they're doing. No one wanted to leak out what was happening. I also thought in a way that honestly shed light on kind of where college basketball is right now, when both of them were asked at different points by different reporters about the impact of NIL. Did NIL help them stay? Did it, pave the road in them sticking around? They both kind of shrugged it off as it's fine, it's good, it's a nice thing, but it was not like a decision maker for either one of them. Frankly, it sounds like they both were more focused on some on-the-court type of goals. J1 talked about team-oriented things, right? Like, we need to go win this championship. Or he didn't say championship in so many words, but they have eyes set on those kinds of things. LJ Cryer talked some about needing to grow his game as well as those same kind of team-oriented goals. Interesting conversation to be had as far as which of those two guys, Cryer or Jawan, projects to the better pro prospect. Obviously, Roberts is still kind of that tweener spot at that 6'8", 6'9". The pros want a lot of ball handling and shooting of threes. At least the NBA does. Jawan, I think, has a pretty solid jump shot, actually, and it's weird to see. I think it's probably better than his free throw percentage would indicate. But he doesn't necessarily have a lot of that outside kind of stuff outside of his passing, and his passing actually makes me wonder, like, is there some sort of a small ball role out there for him? I don't know necessarily. He's going to come back and work on that game and work on the program here, and we'll see where that is a year from now, right? LJ Cryer, frankly, as a shorter shooting guard, is coming back to kind of show, like, hey, are you just the kind of dominant bucket getter that, like, they got to take? The same way that at 6'3", Marcus Sasser got taken at the 25th overall pick in the 2023 draft, because you can't turn down guys that get buckets at some degree, right? Like, that you just got to get those guys on your roster. But also, like, without putting the point guard situation out there, if it's a score first guy that comes in the transfer portal, if it's some combination of Cryer and Mercy, the freshman coming in from California, an electric scorer, but also developing into the point guard type role himself, and he's much younger, obviously. LJ could show off some of that playmaking kind of point guardy stuff, frankly, and he got forced into a bad situation in the Duke game, but I would point out that it was the kind of thing we were hoping to see more out of him in that Duke game, right, once Jamal Shead went down. So I completely get that, especially when you factor in his foot injury that he didn't disclose publicly in these, they're all over the internet, but these, like, video recorded things that several people put out from for the informal press conference and availability. I think that come back to work on the actual basketball aspect of that is interesting. And frankly, you wonder, like, does NIL mean he does it at Houston versus the G League or something? We'll never know, I guess, fully, because that's not the necessary option. We know Landon Gosling is running a great campaign, Run It Back, with the Link U. And they're really, striving to get a lot of money back to kind of run this thing back. No one technically has to leave from last year's number 1 overall seed. Everyone has at least the COVID year of eligibility left, if not more. We know that Damian Dunn has entered the transfer portal. We know that Houston also only rostered 14 guys last season because Kelvin Sampson believes in always rostering just 14 guys. That way, if something crazy happens in August, you've got a spot, right? So we know that technically there are 2 roster spots available. Ryan Elvin has not said anything. I'd imagine he's holding a clipboard next season. I know that Sampson loves him. He's talked about him as a guy that could be a future coach on his staff for sure. He's one of the hardest working guys in the program by every measure and every story you hear. And so I could see that being his role. Malika said he's coming back, so he'll be back. Cryer has now said it. Roberts has now said it. Everyone's waiting on Jamal Shead. And, we're going to jump on him in the second segment, talk some about what that looks like. But I do think it's interesting to look at. Houston is going to return at least 4 of its 5 starters from last season. That's kind of a rarity in this modern era of phenomenal Houston Cougar basketball. We don't see Houston run it back and get 4 to 5 starters to return all that often. It's just not a thing that, through injuries or going pro or Tremont Mark transferred or whatever, you see very often here. Frankly, it's been because guys got hurt one year or whatever, but it's not like they don't want to stay a part of the program. Houston just has had a lot of turnover. And now, obviously, it's hard to replace Naismith Defensive Player of the Year, Big 12 Player of the Year, NABC Defensive Player of the Year, et cetera, and Jamal Shead. But I do think it's fascinating to see that this will be the most continuity of the roster really in, like, the last, could you say, the whole decade that Sampson's been here? And what does that mean for Houston as a program? I don't want to tackle that yet. I want to tackle that after the Jamal Shead decision is final, after the point guard decision is final. But in the second segment, I do want to talk some about where the Jamal Shead situation stands presently. But first, if you just can't get away from competing, just like winning a little too much, or just like me and are good at winning, you want to keep winning, you got to go check out FanDuel, because right now it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball's in full swing. All things are happening right now. Masters this weekend, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So Jamal Shead is the lone COVID year guy that could potentially return, that has not formally said anything. And I think by and large, everyone's assuming he's going pro. And for what it's worth, I'm on the record, and I'll continue to put myself on that record of saying, once he makes a roster, he's a pro for a long time, like a Jameer Nelson type of long time pro. If you're a pro basketball fan, Jameer Nelson had like a 12-year career where he's a starter at the beginning of it, and then just a kind of a journeyman backup. DJ Augustine did a fairly similar kind of thing. Guys that once they stick in the league, I mean, Houston Rockets have Fred VanVleet right now, kind of, those guys that are 6 foot to 6'2", maybe even 5'11", but just the great locker room guys, great leadership guys, and do everything you need them to do for your basketball team. Jamal Shead is that. He will be that in the pros, but someone's got to give him a chance. And we continue to talk about it. This future of Jamal Shead is a foregone conclusion in the NBA draft and all of that. And for what it's worth, Kelvin Sampson's on record the last couple of years as saying he encourages guys to maintain eligibility and go try out the draft process for as long as you can. There's always a parameter on how long you can go into it before you got to either withdraw or put yourself in fully, because you get evaluated by scouts. They tell you what to work on, what they want to see out of your game, etc. And then you can always come back as long as you do it before that window is up. I imagine you could very well see that happen with Jamal here at the very least, and at least have him go see what they had to say. He did that a year ago as well. Obviously added a lot to his game and took over a much bigger role in what Houston did this last season than he did the year before. But before all the draft workouts, and after the great year he's had, mock drafts currently are all over the map, but none of them are super high on him, which is fascinating. I know he doesn't have a ton of the measurables, and I know he is an older college player. So the two things you see NBA teams get obsessed with are the measurables. How tall is he? How long are his arms? Can he run and jump? Those kind of things, right? And youth. They want the 19-year-old kid that can develop more than they want the 23-year-old kid that can develop. Draftnet.com, The Ringer, and No Ceilings, which is a all draft all the time year-round organization, all three of those do not have him being drafted in the first or second round. Him as an undrafted free agent after NBA draft night. Tankathon, which is an analytical-based draft board, has him at pick 54. NBA Draft Room has him at 55. Those are kind of the back end of people that have him drafted. Bleacher Report has him at 38, which is 8 picks into the second round. Sports Illustrated has him at pick 33. Obviously, teams and that's all dependent as well, but that's everywhere you look. He is some version of a second round pick or later. And while again, I think he's a long-term pro as long as he gets a shot, and I totally get the value of saying, hey, that is my shot, go make the G League roster, work my way up, etc. Because again, I don't think he'll get turned down once he's on the roster. I do think it's worth pointing out, as I've done a couple times now, that second round picks have no guarantees. You get a second round pick in June, you might be cut by August 1st, right? And you make whatever the 10-day checks for Summer League were in July. That's the deal, right? And I feel fairly confident that between he makes good NIL money and all those kinds of things. I feel fairly confident that unless he feels like he could have a national championship and all those kinds of things next year and not see it get any better, That's not what Jamal would want. No one wants to go into that situation and have no guarantees, especially when you have a great option to fall back on, like what's happening at Houston. I say that to say not to get like your hopes up in a crazy strong kind of way, but the argument for Jamal Shead to come back and run it back with this group is there, right? Frankly, it might be there up until that final day where he has to officially enter the draft or pull back out. But I feel like unless that draft stock improves dramatically in the coming weeks, I I don't know that that's the kind of draft stock I'm telling a kid to go enter in, right? Marcus Sasser a couple years ago had an injury when he entered. He missed a lot of the season in the 2021-2 season. Missed a lot of the season hurt, went to the draft process, and decided he was going to come back to Houston, right? That was a big deal for last season, for the 2022 and 2023 season, that Sasser was coming back. He came back and won all the accolades, turned himself into a 25th overall pick, etc. Jamal Shead obviously is a little different because he's not proving that he's 100% healthy from the ankle injury. I think everyone understands that a rolled ankle will heal fairly quickly. Just timing of it was pretty rough, right? But I do wonder if there's some argument to be made, much like Sasser's evaluation, that he could come back and improve that stock by doing XYZ, showing that it wasn't a one-off year, whatever the case may be, right? I don't know what they'll say. I'm not a draft expert, although as we get closer to those kind of decisions, I may pull one on. We'll see. We got great people at Locked On that do that. I love the guys at No Ceilings that do that. We'll see where that goes. But I just don't think it's crazy to think. I don't think it's crazy to think that Jamal Shead balking at a 33rd overall pick evaluation at the high end is crazy. Like that's not the kind of guarantee you'd anticipate the Big 12 Player of the Year. And I can already see the comment sections. This happens every time. People, how could the Big 12 Player of the Year be the 33rd overall pick? And because we've seen the college game not translate. It's the same reason Zach Edey is two-time Player of the Year and not projected to be in the lottery. It's the same reason Hasheem Thabeet won the Defensive Player of the Year that Jamal Shead just won twice and flamed out in the G League, right? The college game and the pro game, for a couple different rule differences as well as just athletic differences, they're just different. And while it's the highest level of professional basketball, it is a different game, and they're projecting different bits and pieces. I'll say it again. I think Jamal Shead's a long-term NBA pro, but being drafted in the second round at the highest end of projections has me thinking there's a real chance here that he does think about running this thing back with with LJ, with Jaywan, with Malik, with Emmanuel, with a healthy Terrence, with a healthy JoJo, Ramon, all these guys, right, coming back. I think there's a real chance that kind of a thing happens. And I know I'm always the optimistic guy. Of all your Houston Cougar podcasters, I know I'm the one that's overly optimistic and way too positive. Some other people are much more realistic with situations with things like the football program or whatever, right? I just feel like I look at those evaluations and think, man, I don't know that I jump at that. And I don't know that I would advise Jamal to just blindly jump at it either. He's not asking me. I just look at it and see something that, frankly, I think raises the question. We'll be following it all day on Wednesday. I say Wednesday because it feels like these guys are going kind of one at a time. Jamal Shead is the last one left. I think it's worth saying that probably means he's going to talk about it on Wednesday at some point. So stay tuned to social media for all of that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about getting ready for the spring football game on Saturday and a question I've got about the guys catching the football. But first, if you're looking to get to some sort of a game or concert or a theater performance or a comedy show or anything happening in and around Houston or wherever you live, you got to go check out GameTime because they've got a great app to help you find the best tickets and the best prices guaranteed. Now, if you've got a frustrating ticketing experience in your past, forget about it. GameTime app lets you check out exactly where your seats are located. You can see the exact view from those seats in that venue for that event. You can also say, hey, I kind of want to sit roughly over here. Give them a section and a row. Let them pick the seat That's an average of 18% savings for you in your pocket. If you can verify with them that you found the same section and row for cheaper, that give you back 110% of the difference. All kinds of last minute deals, flash deals, all in pricing, great things for the consumer like you and me at GameTime. Go download the GameTime app today. Check out the best tickets, the best prices for all kinds of things you can go see. Take out the guesswork. Terms apply. Again, create an account, go to GameTime, down the GameTime app, and use code LOCKED on college, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I think we think of Houston as having talented wide receivers because they do. I don't mean to say at any point in this that they don't. Houston's got tremendous wide receiver talent. We saw that even while last year was a struggle in so many ways. The wide receiver room continued to impress, even in like the almost win against Texas or the actual wins against West Virginia and Baylor, right? The wide receivers put up and put out every single week. But I have a question about this Houston Cougar roster when I see this offense and these pass catchers getting ready for the spring game this weekend. Obviously, be a little bit different without Donovan Smith out there, projected starting quarterback. I don't think there's any reason to think he's not at this point. We'll see what Zion looks like. Zion Chris transferred in from Louisiana. But when I look at Kevin Barbay and the offense he runs, he was the OC at Mississippi State last year, the OC at Appalachian State the year before. He spent the previous few years at Central Michigan as the offensive coordinator and the associate head coach. He also spent some time at SFA in 2018. Stephen Avosso was not very good that year, so take that one with a grain of salt. Numbers a little bit inflated. But at Mississippi State last year, they threw 29 passes a game. App State the year before, 29.9 passes per game. At Central Michigan, it went 34.5 in his last year there. Not a great record, so they had to come back from, throw to come back a couple of those games. 28.7 in their best year record-wise there. 33.8 in the year before that. And then at SFA, again, they went 2-8, not very good. We're down a lot of the season. They threw 41.4 passes per game. I still have to say that, honestly, it looks like the Barbay offense is throwing around 30 passes per game. Okay, I look at what Tulane did under Fritz the last couple years when they were successful. Last year, they threw 26 passes per game. The year before that, 27 passes per game. And even in 2021, when they spent a lot of the game down because they were just not very successful, they went 2-10. They threw 31 passes per game. I think realistically, when I look at what Barbay's going to do in a pure raw numbers perspective, you're looking at like throwing somewhere in the low 30s in terms of passes per game, right? You're going to run the ball a lot more. You're going to spend some clock and have less snaps, right? So let's just say, for math's sake, you throw 35 passes a day, right? Every week you throw 35 passes a game. I try to kind of calculate, well, where's the ball going? Who gets targets? Where's it going to look like? Okay, I imagine Joseph Manjack and Sam Brown lead the way. I put them down at 7 targets apiece. Okay, I think Jonah Wilson, Mikal Harrison-Pilot, and Boogie Johnson are kind of in the next tier of guys, and I gave them both 4 apiece. I think they'll rotate. Talk about that in a second, but 4 catches apiece. Tight ends are active in this offense, so I gave Matt Burns and Malik Carr, the transfer from Michigan State, gave them each at tight end 3 catches apiece. Now, if like Carr turns into the pass catcher or vice versa, 6 for the tight ends, right? That's what I'm thinking there. The running back kind of thinking the same thing as a group of Parker Jenkins, Stacey Sneed, Rashawn Sanford. Let's say 4 catches for the group there at running back. That's already 36 passes. Okay. So before you say, Parker, you're crazy, they're going to get Sam Brown more than 7 targets. Before you say, Parker, you're crazy, they're going to get Mikal Harrison-Pilot coming off that redshirt year way more than 4 targets. Boogie Johnson deserves more than 4 targets, etc. We're already well over the average of what the Barbay offense or the Fritz system typically throw. Okay, that's 36 passes as I laid it out. That doesn't include like the little forward toss on a reverse that we've seen Barbe run, that we've seen Houston run in the past. We know our receivers can do that kind of thing well, get Boogie Johnson out on the perimeter. But that's a forward pass too, right? This doesn't include like the kind of pass attempt that, throwing the ball out of bounds or throwing an intentional incompletion to avoid a sack or avoid a turnover is. I mean, those are also pass attempts. And I see all that and like, wait a second. I think the strength of this team is still the wide receiver room, at least offensively. And if not the whole team, I'd probably argue the whole team, but that's not today's debate. I don't know that I'm comfortable. Like who's going to get the ball? I think Sam Brown deserves the ball more than 7 times a game. I just do. I think Manjack deserves it more. I think Mikal deserves it more. I think Jonah deserves it more. I think Boogie. I think these guys need the ball thrown their way. And I hadn't even opened up the possibility in those 36 targets to having, the way Dalton Karn showed up last year and just kind of he needed the ball more all of a sudden, right? I think something's got to give here. They're going to have a little bit different offense than Barbe's run in his past, or you're going to see some guys like, why aren't I getting the ball enough? I don't know. Wide receiver can be an interesting position in that aspect. Obviously, the way it could play out is they kind of take turns eating. This week it's Sam Brown. This week it's Joe Manjack. This week it's Boogie, whatever. I do think that Sam Brown is your like defense bender as it currently stands. And by that, I mean the way he runs routes, the speed he plays with, the explosiveness in and out of cuts. He can do all the routes you ask him. He's great over the middle. He's great on the edge. He's the guy that you're going to target early and often enough to make sure that you're forcing a double somewhere, forcing the defense to rotate how their coverage works, right? Manjack is a unique guy as far as his build goes at wide receiver. I wonder if he can be kind of a tweener because Barbe and Fritz both like a bunch of 11 and 12 personnel, which means you have one running back and then 1 or 2 tight end, fullback, H-back types. Could he be that H-back type that kind of like does both spots? That would make Houston a lot better. So maybe. So anyway, I think he gets the next set of targets. He's kind of your surefire, 3rd and 6. You're trying to find a way to get him on a stick route kind of guy. I think what's interesting is that actually that next tier, right? I don't think there's any question of what Sam Brown and Joe Manjack bring to the team. I think the next tier there, Jonah Wilson's got crazy speed, and one of the handful of games he got to play was on burn it over the top, right? I've told you for a year, we saw it a couple different times last year, but Stephon Boogie Johnson's got crazy speed and phenomenal footwork, right? Does he become that take the defense, take the top off the defense and take them deep to open up underneath stuff kind of guy? What does he bring to the table in those instances? And how do those two guys overlap? How do they play together? Do they just alternate series because running go routes can be exhausting? Or do they do something more complementary? The wild card here remains to me Mikal Harrison-Pilot. Mikal Harrison-Pilot is one of the highest ranked recruits to ever come through the University of Houston based on recruit ranking websites and composite scores and things like that. He's also like coming off of an injury that took him out of a lot of the year last year, so much so that as a redshirt, he didn't even play in the 4 games that a redshirt is typically allowed to play. He also, for what it's worth, though, like in his high school tape that I had to go back to kind of piece together where our wide receiver room is at, has incredible footwork, incredible ball skills, and is very vividly, because he played a little bit of everything at Temple High School in Central Texas, he's a competitor, so much so that it jumps off the screen. And so I feel like you got to get him in the mix on the field as well. I don't know, if they go 12 personnel, you only get 2 wide receivers. If they go 11 personnel, you get 3 wide receivers out there. I don't know who the third starter is. I can tell you right now from a competitive aspect, if we're playing badminton, chess, checkers, whatever, I think I might go Mikal Harrison-Pilot just off of some of the stuff I got to see in his high school tape alone, right? And so that, when you factor in like Boogie's speed, we saw Jonah do in his limited time last year, like who gets the ball, right? Who gets the ball? Now, could I be proven completely wrong when they show up for the spring game on Saturday and they say in the spring game they throw what is, on pace to throw 45 footballs? It's like, okay, Parker, you're an idiot. This guy's a Division I offensive coordinator. He sees where this talent is. He sees how to get them the ball. Maybe. I just look at what he's done well. I look at what teams Fritz has had that have done things well, and I see a consistency where they're throwing the football a lot less. And I don't know if their present tense roster, if that ties well into what we're built to do. Now, the whole thing is give the guy time to build the program. I think Parker Jenkins is the kind of running back you can build this thing around. I think the thing can get in the direction where Jenkins is the star by his senior year, right? Like I fully get that could be where this thing is headed. I just look at this fall's roster for this spring game, and I got questions. And that's where I'm at. Now, if you think I'm crazy, you think I'm silly, you think I got a screw loose up top, or if you think I talk too fast, tell me in the comment section down below. I appreciate you guys listening each and every day. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.